right, the board was in executive session and now we're back open we're reconvening in our open session. So the next thing on our agenda is awards and recognitions. So I'm going to turn it over to Liz to go over our awards and recognitions.
All right. Good evening, everyone, and thank you very much. I'd like to begin our virtual recognitions tonight by acknowledging a new Heights High athletics program that is gaining a lot of attention in the local media, Build the Bridge. The brainchild of Heights High's offensive coordinator, Kahari Hicks, and head football coach, Max Stevens, Build the Bridge challenges teams of different racial, socioeconomic, religious, and geographic backgrounds to connect with one another and discover that they likely have more in common than just a love of football. Teams get together for a day of scrimmages or a game of kickball, followed by some thought-provoking conversation ending with an all-team barbecue. So far, over 60 different teams across 5 states have signed up to take the Build the Bridge Challenge. And I just want to say, when I found out that Coach Hicks and Coach Stevens were engaging in this, I was so proud of the team, of the coaches, of the district and the community. This is really the type of leadership that we need right now. We need creative ideas in order to provide opportunities for our students to learn from one another and to learn from young people all across the country. And we know that sports is a very important bridge builder. And this took off really, really quickly and has lots of support from the NFL, the Pro Football Hall of Fame. And I look forward to seeing this program founded here in Cleveland Heights, Ohio, expand across the country. So I definitely want to acknowledge and thank Coach Stevens and Coach Hicks for this great, tremendous work. And that is my recognitions for this evening. We are in the summertime, so we have less recognitions now that we're not in school.
Thanks, Liz. Now I'm going to move on to our statements from the audience. And we have 5 people who have signed up. So I'm going to call the folks in this order. I like to announce it so they can be prepared for the call. The first one is going to be Gary Cantor. Second one will be Charles Drake. Third one will be Karen Rigo. Fourth one will be Cornelia Meyer. And the 5th one will be Tiffany Underheil. So I'm going to go ahead and call Mr. Cantor now. Hi, Gary. It's Jody Serini from Cleveland Heights University Heights City School District. Are you ready to make your public statement? Okay, can you give me just 1 second? I need to put you on speaker. I'll let you know when you're on speaker, okay? All right, Gary, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Go ahead and make your statement.
And can you hear me clearly?
I can. I'm going to make sure the volume's up all the way. Okay. Go ahead.
Thank you, Board President Serini. Tonight I will be discussing the currently ongoing employee contract negotiation and the operating levy increase that was defeated in the spring. In the unprecedented coronavirus extended balloting on issue 26 this March and April, informed voters decisively defeated your proposed 7.9 mil operating levy. That is, they voted no. And no means no. It does not mean no for now. It does not mean put it back on the ballot in November. No means no. You each swore an oath to represent all the citizens of the school district. Your oath didn't say you would only represent the citizens who vote yes for operating levy. You have a 5-year forecast indicating a $9.3 million deficit at the end of fiscal year 2022 and a much greater deficit of $39.4 million at the end of fiscal 2024. You have an annual deficit of $15 million. This is unsustainable and cannot be pushed onto the taxpayers. Enrollment is decreasing while costs are escalating. Wages and benefits comprise 80% of the district's costs. The district is currently negotiating with the teachers on the contract that expired a week ago. The board has an opportunity to bring those wages and benefits in line with the marketplace in today's uncertain economy. Saving the taxpayers from having to fund out of their own pockets a $39.4 million deficit over just 4 years. There is no indication whatsoever, however, that the board members understand and take seriously their obligations to represent all stakeholders in these contract negotiations. Instead, the entire chain of deficit satisfaction events is carefully orchestrated to avoid meaningful cost reductions, leading, as always, to a school board-led campaign to pass an operating levy. The board handpicks members of the Lay Finance Committee that it knows will support tax increases. The Lay Finance Committee is not charged with cutting costs, only recommending the operating levy millage based on the treasurer's 5-year forecast. The board accepts, passes, and then touts the Lay Finance Committee's recommendation. This past spring, the school board president and vice president were on the Vote Yes campaign steering committee. In that same election, the district illegally spent $34,675 on the levy campaign's voter survey, for which the state auditor has issued a finding for recovery. And instead of owning up to this transgression, the district falsely blamed its consultant. Now is the time to correct course. You can do this by simply representing all stakeholders in your current contract negotiations. Make the tough but necessary decisions. Don't just throw the problems onto the already overburdened shoulders of the taxpayers. If you do the right thing, it won't be necessary to put a school tax increase on the ballot this November. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Cantor. So the next person that I will be calling will be Charles Drake. Is this Mr. Drake? Hi, it's Jody Srini from Cleveland Heights University Heights City School District. I'm going to put you on for public comments, but give me a second to put you on speaker, okay? All right, can you hear me, Mr. Drake?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
We can. Go ahead.
Thank you. Dear board members, I, like almost all residents of the school district, want our district to succeed. But I am concerned that higher taxes are a deterrent to attracting younger families to the Heights. The Cleveland Heights University Heights Board of Education members, past and present, have done grievous damage to the school system. You were elected to oversee and manage the funds entrusted to you for the benefit of our children in a practical manner. The following items were not, Our teachers and our administrators receive generous contribution packages. The administrators participate in the state employees retirement system. The district pays 14% of the salaries to the SCRS system as the employer contribution. But The board also pays the employee earned portion, an additional 10% to SCRS. Yes, that is a full 24% contribution to SCRS, and the district pays all of it. My employer does not do that. This means 10%. This 10% means the taxpayers are incurring an additional cost of more than $410,000 per year. Over 5 years, that's almost $2 million. The board recently gave layoff notice to 8 teachers whose salaries were a total of about $400,000. If the administrators paid their own employee portion of their contribution, these teachers could be retained to educate our students. The teachers pay into the state teachers retirement system, STRS. The teacher contribution is 14% of their annual contribution, while the board matches it in full. But in addition to the 14% the board pays as the employer contribution, the board also pays 1% of the teacher's 14% contribution. That 1% totals $449,750 for a number I received from Mr. Gaynor. In addition to the generous pay and retirement contributions, our teachers and administrators receive an unbelievable health care package. The annual cost of the medical coverage for a district employee family is $31,065.12. The employee pays only $1,850 a year annually. That's just 6% of the cost. The board pays an astounding $29,215.12. That's 94% of the total cost. Do other employers in the city that we have pay this? For individual coverage, that cost is $11,505.84. Of that, the individual employee pays only $700. If the district employees were required to pay 16% of the annual premium, which is what most employers require, this would save in excess of $3 million per year. In other words, we would ask the single employee to pay $1,844 annually, and an employee, meaning family coverage, to pay $4,970 annually, $414 a month. And you could do this through a flexible spending account. These contracts were negotiated on the board's behalf by Treasurer Scott Gaynor and Assistant Superintendent Lombardo and other employees of the district, not you members of the Board of Education. No board member has been on either negotiating team. The board has allowed the taxpayers' money to be thrown away because the negotiating team receives the same benefits that are negotiated. This is an act of malfeasance and breach of each of you individually board's fiduciary responsibility to our citizens and the taxpayers of the community. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Drake. So the next person I'm going to call on is Karen Rigo. Is this Karen? Hi, Karen. Are you ready to make your public statement? Okay, I'm going to put you on, but hang on. Give me a second to put you on speaker. Okay, can you hear me?
I can.
Go ahead and make your statement.
Okay. My name is Karen Rigo, and I'm the president of Cleveland Heights Teachers Union. Thank you, Superintendent Kirby, CFO Gaynor, President Serini, and the Board of Ed for allowing me to speak tonight. I would like to address 2 issues with you this evening. First, I hope that you are considering the results of the staff survey and the number of staff that can't return to school or are understandably nervous to do so. Yes, COVID-19 numbers are low among children. Yes, parents need to go back to work. Yes, the mental health of our students matters. However, teachers matter too. There is no guarantee that we can make our staff and families safe and that the buildings will follow the guidelines. We can say we are going to be 6 feet apart. We can say and that they can say that students will be assigned so that only half will be in the building at a time. But that doesn't mean that some or all of that will happen. I don't even know where to begin what a debacle the mass will be. I'm asking that you consider the lives of the people who are in the school, and if you can't guarantee that an in-school option should be a choice, then it should not even be a choice if you can't guarantee our safety. It is not safe for us to be in person, so it is not safe for our students and teachers to be in school. The second reason I'm coming to you tonight is because of the salary notices. I often hear how wonderful our teachers are and that we have the best, and I completely agree. That is why I teach here, and that is why I ran for president of the union. I was confused when salary notices went out last week without the experience steps. I was hoping this was done in error. However, according to Superintendent Kirby, it was not. I find this to be a deliberate attempt by administration to enforce what they want on the salary schedule for next year. This is completely unacceptable, and we would expect if we were not even before the start of the school year, then we would expect our current contract to stay in place. Don't just say you appreciate us, show us. Our teachers have earned the salary and they deserve what they have earned. Thank you for your time this evening.
Thank you, Ms. Rigo. The next person I'm going to be calling will be Cornelia Meyer. Miss Meyer did not answer her phone, and she did not have a voicemail where I could leave a message. So I am going to call the next person, Tiffany Underheil. Is this Tiffany? Hi, this is Jody Serini from the Cleveland Heights University Heights City School District. Are you ready to make your public statement? Okay, give me a second. I'm going to put you on speaker. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Go ahead and make your statement.
Okay, are you ready for me? I'm sorry.
We are ready. Go ahead.
Okay. Hi, good evening. My name is Tiffany Underheil. I am a proud teacher at Monticello Middle School and the secretary of the Cleveland Heights Teachers Union. Thank you so much to the board members for allowing me to speak this evening. I'm speaking tonight regarding the proposed plan for reopening our schools this fall. I cannot wait to welcome students back to school. As a teacher, there is nothing quite like the first day of school. For the first time in my career, however, the apprehension I feel is not just the first day jitters. I am truly scared to go back. I am scared because I do not know how we can reopen safely. I do not know how we can welcome our students into classrooms that are properly cleaned and assure that they are properly cleaned. I do not know how, given the sizes of our classrooms, how we can keep 6 feet of distance, even if we split students in half. I do not know if I will be able to enforce my students wearing masks. I do not know what will happen if someone who enters our building tests positive with COVID-19. I do not know what will happen to my sick leave balance if I must quarantine and/or if I test positive myself. I do not know what will happen to my students if a substitute cannot be secured to cover this potential leave and the potential leaves of my colleagues. I do not know what will happen to my 3 children, my bonus son, and my husband if I am exposed or become ill, or what should happen if we attempt to see my parents. I ask respectfully that until these questions can be answered, and until we can be sure that our staff, our students, and all families involved can return safely, that we do not open the doors of our buildings. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Underheil. And that concludes our public statements for this evening. And the next item on our agenda is the consent agenda. Do I have a motion to approve, to consider the consent agenda?
I motion that we approve the consent agenda. Or consider it.
Consider it.
Consider it, thank you.
Do I have a second to consider the consent agenda?
Second.
All right, any discussion on the consent agenda?
I would like to welcome our new principal for, oops, hang on, I've just lost my place. I'm sorry. Oh, goodness. Ms. Taylor, who will be coming to Oxford starting very soon. So that was a good piece of news to read.
And I would like to thank Arlington Valley Farms for their donation of food. I am amazed at the generosity of our community with all of the food donations that have been made. So thank you. Any other discussion on the consent agenda? If not, then Mr. Gaynor, will you call the roll?
Ms. Wright?
Yes.
Mr. Josh?
Yes.
Mr. Heinz?
Yes.
Ms. Sweeney?
Yes.
Ms. Lewis?
Yes.
Next item on the agenda is finance and the 5-year forecast. So Mr. Gaynor, I will turn it over to you.
Thank you. I'm just making sure. Okay, there we go. Technology was moving a little slow there with consent agenda. All right, so we do have the 5-year forecast here for your approval tonight. Do you want to do your motion to consider it at this time?
Oh, yes.
I motion that we consider the 5-year forecast.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, any discussion on the 5-year forecast?
Absolutely. Let me give you a little bit of context here, and this kind of rolls right into our Lay Finance Committee presentation. The 5-year forecast had a couple of changes that you are being approved tonight. So had a lot of good conversation in the multiple meetings with the Lay Finance Committee. They asked a lot of tough questions, and you know, all those are recorded and can be put online. I think that one of the bigger things that came from those conversations that changed the forecast was an increase in the property tax collections. So you're going to see that we have bumped that property tax up. I had previously reported to you that we had the county estimated a drop in property tax collections from about 92.5% to 89.5% or so. And I assumed that that was related to COVID. But in having some conversations with peer districts and also a conversation with Brian Dunn at the county, that was really, they were basing that based on the calendar 20 trend that they were seeing. It was not COVID related, and that any COVID impact on the forecast they believe would be a timing issue, and it would be a matter of just some increased delinquencies that would ultimately be collected. So what we did to update these numbers was actually went and looked at a 5-year trend for current property tax collections, split the difference between, you know, the 92.5% and the 89.5% collection, and then also looked at a 5-year trend for delinquent collections and added that back in. So property tax or real estate taxes, you'll see there have been increased to $72,250,000. So there's one major difference to this forecast from the forecast that you approved in May. The other major changes that I would note, so we still have the foundation program at that reduced level. I just got an email while we were on this meeting from OSBA and OASBO that guidance coming from the state says that that at this point in time, they expect that cut to remain at that same level, which is kind of what we assumed in the forecast. So, so I guess that's bad news and good news. At least it's not worse than it is currently, which we were a little fearful of. So you'll see that drop in foundation, and that carries forward there too. But remember, in the previous forecast, we had the CARES funds actually showing as revenue. You don't see that there anymore because we've actually used that CARES money, and you'll hear about that in the school reopening plan later. But we've used that CARES money to, to continue to pay the staff that we had this year for May and part of June. So we've actually just, moved that money out to another fund and then moved some of the expenditures that we had for salary and wages to another fund as well. Remember, that was about 1.2 million. Didn't offer 1.4 million that we were cut by the state, but that's what that was used for, and why you don't see it there any longer. Otherwise, we have the Ed Choice vouchers continuing to increase. Nothing's changed there. And the other, I guess, major thing would be that you'll see encumbrances estimated at $1,750,000. That number is likely to go down just a little bit more as we're continuing to close the fiscal year this week, but not significantly. We're shooting for like a 1.5 million there, I think. And fiscal 20 now reads actual. So we have actual numbers in all of those items. Probably some minor changes to bank fees, interest posting. We're waiting on bank statements that lag a little bit, but no major changes there either. So that's the 5-year forecast as it stands today. Again, knowing that there's still some uncertainty involved with that, but at least we have some actual numbers in fiscal 20. And we know a little more than we did before, and Ryan will talk about this is, as he goes through the Lay Finance Committee presentation, this is the forecast you'll see throughout. This is the forecast that we used to run millage models and project numbers there. Any questions on the forecast itself?
So your tweaks and adjustments have changed our first year of deficit from about 10.5 million to 9.2 million. Is that correct?
Correct. So you see a short in the gain, or you see a short-term gain, but if you look out a little longer term, it's actually a little worse. So there did end up being some timing changes to the forecast, but better off by 22, a little worse off in 23 and 4.
Scott, I'm not sure that this is a question. I just want to verify.
Yeah.
So I'm looking at the total voucher line, and I see that in FY23 it's 17 million, and then in FY24 it's just shy of 18 million. And our foundation payment, I mean, it looks like our receipts from state sources in those years are about 17 million. So we're going to be paying more in vouchers than in our receipts from state sources.
Correct.
Is that correct? By fiscal year 23-24.
That if nothing changes, that's absolutely correct. Yes.
So 100% of our state funding will be going to voucher payments of some sort.
Of that foundation funding, you're absolutely, yeah. Other than, don't forget that that disadvantaged pupil aid is also a state source. So, that some might argue that is, that our true state foundation funding would be around $21 million. You get a total of those two lines, but you're right. Strictly foundation, 17.2 million, vouchers, 17.8 million. So all, if not nearly all, of our state funding will be taken by fiscal 24 by vouchers if nothing changes.
So over-reliance on property taxes in an unconstitutional way of funding our state schools. All right, thank you. That answered it for me.
So,
hey, Judy, that unconstitutionality was actually before.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
came into play.
So I'd like to just point out, so we're about $120 million budget. And we are slated at this point to finish the year $3 million in the black. And we have some giant question marks ahead of us. You know, I think we need to have a discussion about making some more cuts. And I mean now, I'm just personally, I'm really nervous beginning this year with such a razor thin margin in the books. And so, you know, Liz, I think that you and the team really need to take another look because I'm really afraid about our ability to finish this year.
Yeah, I mean, it's challenging because we cut very, very high in the spring and then got hit with a bunch of other cuts in the ed choice decisions and all of that. Quite frankly, there are not a lot of places left to cut. And we used all of our CARES Act funding just to cover salaries in the spring. So I share your concern. We have also a reopening plan that is going to, we're trying to keep that as cost neutral as possible. But even a normal school district that wasn't suffering from the challenges of ed choice have noted that unfortunately the federal government hasn't provided enough support for schools in the age of COVID-19. So we look at the budget all the time. So we have a clear awareness and are cutting everywhere. And I just want to know, we cut close to the bone, if not to the bone already. And any other additional savings is not going to be significant. It might be $50,000 here or there, but it won't be, there's not significant numbers of places to cut, but we will certainly continue to look for those savings. But I just want to paint the landscape so people are aware. We kind of used all the tricks already.
I think, well, you know, I'm on the late finance committee, so I know what Ryan is going to be presenting. And I believe we're going to be voting on this 5-year forecast before Ryan makes his presentation. And we vote on this every month. I'm satisfied with the numbers, but I'm sort of with Dan. I mean, we do need to find some additional cuts. I think what's notable is the salary and wages are not increasing. We have no cost of living increases. There's no step increases forecasted in the budget for fiscal year 22. That has actually been in the last 5-year forecast we had, if not the one before that as well. We absolutely need to get our fringe benefits in line with other like school districts. That is an absolute must that we must do. We're in dire financial straits, guys, and you can blame it on the vouchers. You can blame it on the fact that the system that we're a part of is unconstitutional. The reality is the money that's coming in the door. We also have the reality of a levy failure in the spring. We've all been reluctant about putting a levy on the ballot in November. I think there's going to be a conversation that we're going to be having later about that. But I just can't see us surviving without making cuts. And what's regrettable, it really does come down to the ed choice numbers. If you look at the $10 million loss that we're going to have between this fiscal year and last fiscal year, and if you look at the ed choice money that's directly going out the door, we can make ends meet, But what's going to happen now is we're going to have higher class sizes. And these are the things that we've been trying to protect. I mean, we had a gentleman who spoke in the public comment portion beforehand. And I will disagree with many of the things that were said, especially the starting comment about, you know, we're here to oversee the finances of the district. We're here to oversee all aspects of the district, inclusive of student performance and financial. So here, when we were forced to make cuts, I mean, it's going to directly impact our kids. And I think the reason we put a levy on the ballot in the spring was to try to minimize the impact for our children. So we're going to have to look at some cuts, and I'm not sure that we can do it in this little segment of the agenda. I'd like to see what Ryan has to say.
Well, first we have to vote on, first we have to vote on this 5-year forecast. So are we ready to do that? And then we can hear the lay finance presentation.
Yes.
All right. So Mr. Gaynor, will you call the roll?
Mr. Hines.
Yes.
Ms. Serini.
Yes.
Ms. Lewis.
Yes.
Ms. Wright.
Yes.
Mr. Posh.
Yes.
Okay, so I will let you continue, Mr. Gaynor, with the lay finance committee presentation.
Right, and I'm going to turn this directly over to Ryan. So I just want to personally thank, you know, I think he's put together really a nice presentation for you tonight. That's nice flow and very succinct and gives you everything you need. So the lay finance has done a lot of work for not a lot of credit and certainly no pay. So we thank you for that, Ryan and crew. Ryan, are you going to share your screen?
Sure. Can people hear me?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
I'll go ahead and present my screen. And this presentation is available on board docs as well for members of the public and the board that are with the multiple screens that I know many of us have. Okay. And hopefully we're seeing the presentation to the school board screen that says July 7th, 2020. If somebody could verbally give me a yes.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. So my name's Ryan Ruth. I am a 20-plus year member or resident of Cleveland Heights. You know, I have a graduate of Heights High. I have a son who's a rising senior and a daughter who will be a freshman. So, you know, vested in the community and do care a lot about the future. And obviously you guys have a busy meeting today, so I'll try to get right to it. This version of the Lay Finance Committee has been around since December 2018. I've listed the members. All of this information we went over when I was before you back in November. So to not belabor the point, I'll move on, but you do have this in your materials. I do think, however, it's important to reemphasize, you know, kind of what we are and what we aren't. You know, we are a group of individuals with expertise in finance, legal, and education issues. We're a group that cares, that's willing to devote our time on a volunteer basis to try to help the board with their task. We're an independent entity. We're not beholden to the board or not required to make any particular recommendation. You know, that said, we are not auditors and we are not independent investigators. You know, we have to ultimately rely on the forecast of the district CFO. We don't view it as our mandate, and it was not in our kind of creating documents that we should be kind of getting into the nitty gritty and recommending that, oh, you've got one too many 5th grade teachers or anything like that. You know, at a high level, there's some areas that, you know, have concerned us regarding cuts. You know, Mr. Posh brought up fringe benefits. You know, one of the things we talked about in our meetings was that our fringe benefit does seem to be out of line with other districts, but we don't believe it's our role. And honestly, you know, it's beyond our expertise to kind of do a full-blown analysis of our fringe benefit program versus other districts. That's something I think the board would have to you know, rely on experts for in those fields. The other thing I want to emphasize is we are not focused so much on the political considerations. We're going to present you with essentially a couple of options today. And some of this, the board is a political entity. You have been voted in by the public, and you should be taking political considerations into account. We don't view that as our role so much on the Lay Finance Committee. Like I said, back in November, we did have another presentation. In that presentation, I gave quite a bit of information about the history of school funding in Ohio. Many of those items the board was already well versed in. But for the benefit of the public, we went over a lot of those issues. The key takeaway, and something that always surprises people when you tell them about how Ohio law works, I surprised my college-age daughter just today, is you tell them that your property tax collections stay flat over time, regardless of inflation. So you need a levy every once in a while simply to keep up with inflation. And that, always explains why we're on the ballot so much in Ohio in a way that often surprises people. So this is really about inflation, and anybody interested in kind of hearing more can go to the CHUH website or can go back to the district's YouTube channel to the November 2019 board meeting. Why are we here today? Why am I presenting to you? Back in late 2019, we did recommend that the Board of Education put a levy on the ballot. The board did put a levy on the ballot, and unfortunately, that levy was defeated in the March-April election. That was a 7.9 mil levy. We've met several times since then, since the outcome was known in April, to try to figure out, do we really need another levy? What would the size be? And we're here today to make some recommendations. So let me get right to what our recommendations are. It's the unanimous recommendation of the committee, and we have two of them. First, you should put an operating levy on the ballot, and you should do that this year, not wait until 2021. Second, the amount of the operating levy should be between 4.8 and 8.5 mils. Now that's a wide range, and I'll explain why we have such a wide range later on in the presentation. Our process has been, as Mr. Gaynor indicated, we've had several meetings in the past 6 weeks. We put a lot of questions to Mr. Gaynor, some of which he answers offline. Sometimes he answers in the meeting. As part of our process, we didn't just look at the income property taxes. We looked at the possibility of an income tax. We considered the possibility of delaying a levy request to 2021 and what that might mean. And then we also looked at kind of maybe an alternative approach that the district has not employed in the past because of kind of the unique situation we're in with all the uncertainty in the world. So I'll go through a lot of those considerations. Let's start with the income tax. 203 of the 611 school districts in Ohio impose a school district income tax. But if you look at the list, almost all of them are rural. It's very rare for an urban or a first-ring suburb school district to impose an income tax. There are none in Cuyahoga County. Euclid Schools has kind of a weird hybrid creature it's a split income tax. It's not considered a pure school district income tax by the state. There's only one in Stark County. There's one in Lucas County around Toledo. There's two in Hamilton County. There's a few more around Franklin County, but almost all of these are school districts that are right at the edge of a county, out like a West G or comparable to a Solon or an Avon Lake that might have a little, they're split districts that are partially in and partially out. We could find not a single urban or inner ring suburb in the state of Ohio that has a pure school district income tax. Our Lay Finance Committee member, Ms. Petrie, actually found out that back in 1990, CHUH proposed an income tax, and it was defeated 30% to 70%, which might be the worst the district has ever been defeated, at least in the memory of those on the committee. So they're very rare, and the one time it's been tried in this district, it was not popular. So Mr. Gaynor did some research for us, and others of us did some research, and we kind of asked, why is this? One of the main reasons income taxes aren't popular is that there is no income tax on corporations. So essentially, corporate interests really benefit when you go to an income tax instead of a property tax. So I know there was a lot of concern in the last election and a lot of talk about fixed income retirees. If you want to go to an income tax or some sort of other tax to benefit them, unfortunately, the corporations get to tag along and get the benefit. What we find and what the experts in our research indicated to us is that the school district income tax is normally used in rural districts where the property taxes really hit the farmers, and it's considered unfair to have a lot of the school funding, funded by farmers and other agricultural concerns. Other concerns about a school district income tax is that they are flat rate taxes. So very rich citizens of Cleveland Heights will pay, 1% or 0.5%, and the very poorest members of Cleveland Heights, University Heights South Euclid would pay the same percentage. They're not progressive. And because they don't tax corporations, more of the burden is on the individuals. So they end up having a disproportionate impact on middle class and working poor. Because of that, the Lay Finance Committee does not believe the income tax is appropriate for our district. Next, we turn to the property taxes, and the 5-year forecast really is the basis for what we look at when we're looking at property taxes. We went back and looked at what our 5-year forecast said in November of 2019, because that's when we made our last recommendation. We thought, well, if nothing has changed, then maybe 7.9 mils is still the right amount. But there has been quite a bit that's changed since then. The next slide is the 5-year forecast that you all just approved. And I'm just highlighting 4 areas. Mr. Gaynor went over these in his presentation, or some of them, so I won't belabor the point. The real estate taxes back in November were at around 73 million was the estimated collection. Mr. Gaynor did lower that based on guidance from the county, but he's kind of raised it back up. It's slightly worse than it was in last November, but that is a change that we saw. The foundation program, these figures here, I'm sorry, somebody couldn't tell if someone had a question. These figures here have gone from, in the prior versions, we're up around 18.5 or 18.6 million. This reflects now the $1.4 million cut from the state that we experienced this year, and it shows what we expect to experience into the future. Down in the green boxes, we have salaries and wages. The board made some tough cuts, unfortunately necessary, and that's why you see this $59.2 million figure dropping to $58 million because of the $2.5 million in cuts the district approved. And otherwise things would be even worse. But back in November, that $58 million under fiscal year 21 was over 60. And then finally, the Ed Choice voucher estimates continue to come in higher than are in the 5-year forecasts, unfortunately. And so this, in the brown rectangle, these numbers are higher than had been forecasted. So when you look at the net impact here, state cuts 1.4 million worse, decreased property taxes about 750,000 worse, and the voucher costs compared to last November and what we were seeing over the winter are about $2 million worse. So things have gotten worse by $4 million per year for our district. So, thankfully, the district made the cuts that it made in the spring. That has offset a good chunk of this $4 million, but the district is slightly worse off financially than it was when I was last before you in November. When we look at sizing a levy, in many ways, one approach and the approach that we've adopted is to work backwards. So we say, all right, we normally try to size a levy for 3 fiscal years. So we look at the end of fiscal year 23 and we look at what the deficit would be. And that's showing here on the slide with the yellow circle and the red arrow. So we're showing $23.5 million. And we say, all right, how much do we have to raise the revenue in order to make this number essentially zero? And that is the method we employed back in November. And that's the method that we kind of started with this time. Now, as I showed in the prior slides, our financial situation's gotten a bit worse. So the same method that got us to 7.9 mils when we looked at it last November and that we put on the ballot in the spring comes up, that same method gives us an 8.5 mil calculation this time. So because the district's financial situation now is slightly worse, the board would need to put an 8.5 mil levy on the ballot to have a positive cash balance at the end of 2023. So in other words, 8.5 mils takes this number, and if you put it into the revenue, this would be, $1 at the end of fiscal year 2023. That said, there is a lot of uncertainty, perhaps an unprecedented amount of uncertainty. I was looking over my slides, and I'm going to mention 5 areas of uncertainty, and that doesn't even bring into the uncertainty caused by COVID. Mr. Gaynor had indicated that they were trying to get that to cost neutral, which Ms. Kirby just repeated. So we have assumed that COVID is cost neutral, but that's yet a 6th area of uncertainty. But let's look at the big areas of uncertainty and some of the things that make us a little nervous about our ability to rely on the 5-year forecast as much as you can when these things are more under your control. The first is state and federal funding. When we had our meeting, we didn't have any guidance from the state. Mr. Gaynor's indicated that we do now have guidance that 17.2 million figure is probably the baseline we should be looking at. So that's good and bad, as he indicated. There has been new talk recently about a second round stimulus. Whether that would include any federal money for schools is really anybody's guess. I think it's more likely that something will be passed than it was a few weeks or months ago, but still, really uncertain. It's not something certainly we could rely on, but it's possible this could be a positive variance for us. Uncertainty area number 2, ed choice and vouchers. Ms. Serini highlighted this a few minutes ago. The cost to the district of vouchers is it's going up, and we really saw an explosion last year, an additional 3.1 million. We're projecting another 2.5 million. So this is really, the rate of change here is accelerating. The district in the past maybe underestimated voucher costs. I know this is something Mr. Gaynor tries to be more precise on now. And my understanding is we feel we have a good handle on these numbers. There should be no assumption that these are underestimated, but these are obviously big numbers. And why is this an area of uncertainty? Well, I know many of us were involved. My son went down with in one of the groups that testified before the Ohio State Legislature. There was maybe a sense that there could be a legislative fix. I know some of us that are sometimes pessimistic. We're getting maybe a little optimistic that there might be a legislative fix, but then unfortunately the changes ended up being negative for our district. It seems like this could be a positive variance, but it seems like every time there's a change, there's just another way we get damaged by it. So again, an area of uncertainty that could be a positive, but could also be a negative. Another area of uncertainty in the 5-year forecast are the salaries, wages, and benefits. Obviously, there's, as we heard earlier, the teacher contract for the upcoming year is not settled. The 5-year forecast is now significantly less generous in its assumption regarding staff raises. If you look back to the 5-year forecast that the board was approving over the winter, it assumed that the wage line item was going up by $1 million or $1.1 million, $1.2 million per year. The current forecast anticipates freezing salaries for the upcoming year, and then it doesn't have $1 million increases going on. It has $600,000 increases. That's about 1%, and Mr. Gaynor indicates that doesn't mean you can give a 1% COLA. Based upon the makeup of the staff, a lot of that, if step increases were improved, that could eat up some or all of that $600,000. So, that really depends on retirements and other factors. But, the assumptions in here do assume that the district is able to reach agreement with its teachers that does not contain generous raises. Fourth area of uncertainty is there are future cuts baked into the forecast. The forecast assumes that not for this coming school year, but for the following school year, you can find another $750,000 in budget cuts, and it assumes you can find another $750,000 the year after that. So that's on top of the 2.5 you already approved this spring. And then the last area of uncertainty is, this does have us end fiscal year 2023 at $1 or at $0. Does not give you much cushion. Most districts do try to have some sort of cash balance on their books. So, those 5 areas of uncertainty plus COVID uncertainty, really can say, well, we're projecting this out, but it could be better. It could be worse. But if, we can only work with the forecast we have. And if you assume the forecast is correct, we would be at 8.5 mils. Now, in my last presentation, I said, if you wanted to account for some of that uncertainty, you would add some more millage to give you a cushion. And that's why our last recommendation was 7.9 to 9.5 mils. The board wanted, for political reasons, I think, and to try to make it more appropriate to taxpayers, went at the low end of that recommendation. Whether you add, cushion this time around really is more of a political consideration that we think is maybe beyond the purview of the Lay Finance Committee. So this is daunting. 8.5 mils after we just had a smaller levy defeated is not what any of us, were hoping to see from this process. So we did kind of go back and say, well, what happens? What else can we do here? The first thing was, maybe the board has other cuts that it can make. We said, well, if we can't propose specific cuts, but if the board sees or the administration sees that there's cuts out there that could be made, I'll focus you on the bottom of this slide. If instead of $750,000 in cuts could be made next spring, you could get $2 million in cuts. That would reduce your necessary millage from 8.5 to 7.6, for example. And I think if the board wanted to see kind of specific cuts and specific millage, it'd be best to have Mr. Gaynor run that with you either later today or in a different session. But, we did look at some different alternatives. You can make some cuts to reduce this millage. And, the $2 million in cuts would hurt, but, getting a full mill off is a benefit. So these tend to be political considerations we'll leave to the board. What we said, gee, even asking for 7, 8, 9 mils, it seems tough in light of the economic circumstances we find ourselves in. So we kind of went back and said, can we do nothing? I remember watching some of the board meetings, and Mr. Posh and Ms. Sorini, after we learned of the levy's loss, indicated they were concerned about putting a levy on the ballot. So we said, what if we do nothing? And I think the key thing to focus on here, and it was already mentioned, that our annual deficit is around $10 million. So if you look at next year, we're bringing in about $109 million. We're spending about $119 million. And you can see that here in the green box. It's really close to 110 and close to 120. But, it's still about a $10 million spread. So, and that just gets worse in out years, right? 109 million versus 122. So if you don't want to raise any more revenue, your only option is to find essentially 10 million in cuts and then hold the line and not allow costs to increase going forward. Meaning every extra dollar that goes out the door for Ed Choice, you need to find more cuts. What does that mean? What does $10 million even look like? We asked Mr. Gaynor, how do you figure that out? He came up with a number in well over 100. So we're talking about cutting, definitely more than 10% of staff, possibly 15%. We'd be talking about significant cuts to student services, extracurriculars, transportation. Everything would have to be on the cutting board. And that's part of the reason why we've concluded a levy has to go on the ballot. Can we wait? We said, all right, well, what if with all this uncertainty and with, where we are economically, can we wait and maybe put a levy on the ballot in 2021? Essentially, what that means is we have to forego the funds from a levy for 1 year. And we ran models looking at that. Unfortunately, if we run that model, the same model and the same type of calculation that gets us to 8.5 mils requires 14.2 mils if we don't go on the ballot till 2021. So, I don't believe this district has ever passed a double-digit levy, certainly not this century. 14.2 mils is really, really beyond what you commonly see. So we said, well, what if we wanted to pass an 8.5 mil levy next year? how much extra would we need to cut? And the calculation we came up with was more than $5 million. So if you can come up with $5 million in additional cuts next spring, then you can delay a year. But absent that, we really felt like, looking at these stark figures, we've concluded that notwithstanding existing uncertainty and notwithstanding economic hardship, it would be unwise for the board to delay another levy until 2021. So that still left some of us, concerned about an 8.5 mil levy. We're taxpayers as well. We don't want to pay more taxes if we don't think it's necessary. So one of the board lay finance committee members did suggest an alternative approach that really what I'll call maybe the short-term approach. Not that it's a short-term levy, but that it focuses more on the short-term solving some of the short-term finances of the district. Let me tell you what I mean by that. The district normally sizes its levies to try to get through a 3-year cycle, and then it relies on belt tightening and other cuts to get to a 4th year. So we're focused on the fiscal year 23 ending amount, like so. The question becomes, could we focus on an earlier year? Could we focus on, instead of trying to get this $23 million into the positive, could we say, let's focus more short term and just try to get this 9.2 into the positive? So based on, we did take a look at this approach. This is just a 2-year levy cycle. So, it's much shorter cycle, and the issue would be you might need to go on the ballot, much sooner, even if a levy passes. But if you go on the ballot with this 2-year cycle using the same approach, we went down from 8.5 mils to 5.6 mils. And then we ran the same calculation we did before and said, well, if you could find $2 million in cuts next spring instead of $750,000, how could that reduce the millage? And that would take you from 5.6, down to, this says 4.8, but it's underneath the caption down here, underneath the key. So that is why the low end of our recommendation is 4.8. We thought, gee, 2 million in cuts would be tough, but it might be something that's feasible for this upcoming year. So 4.8 on the low end, 8.5 on the high end. Why might you take the alternative approach or not? The pros are smaller millage. Taxpayers like that. There could be political advantages to that. The cons are you might need to be back on the ballot in 2 or 3 years, absent major changes to state federal funding. And really, it reduces your ability to survive variances. If you have unforeseen costs, if you've passed a lower millage levy, it's just tougher to survive them. Which approach to take, we ultimately defer to you as the elected board to decide. Different lay finance committee members, I think, have different views on this. We did not have a consensus. We can see merits to both approaches. So again, it's our recommendation that we place an operating levy on the ballot this year and that the amount of the levy be between 4.8 and 8.5 mils. A couple other items. How much would this raise? Every mill raises about $1.1 million here in Cleveland Heights University Heights School District. So an 8.5 mil levy raises $9.5 million. A 5.6 mil levy raises 6.2. And at the bottom, it shows kind of what overall property tax receipts would increase to. What will a levy cost a homeowner? This chart here shows, and this is based on market value, not the 35% assessed value. If you have a $100,000 home in Cleveland Heights, this is the additional property tax you would pay each year, not each half, but each year, at 8.5 mils and then at 5.6 mils. And this also shows the amounts for a $150,000 home, a $200,000 home, and a $300,000 home. I would note we calculated the percentage increase in property tax. At 8.5 mils, it's a 7% increase over what you're paying now. And at 5.6 mils, it's a 4.6 increase over what you're paying now. Back in my last presentation, we talked a little bit about the 2018 property value reassessment. And I noted that before that reassessment, the average Cleveland Heights homeowner was paying 4.12% of the market value of the property. And I calculated that based on my own house, frankly. I went back and looked at my taxes. After the reassessment, because most of the Cleveland Heights house valuations were increased, most people, got a tax cut on a percentage basis. They were still paying the same dollar amount on average, but the average taxpayer was now paying 3.84% of the market value of their property. If you were to go to the 8.5 mil levy, this essentially puts people back to the 4.11, 4.12 that they were at before the reassessment. So it essentially puts people back at the same percentage property tax rate. At 5.6 mils, a Cleveland Heights homeowner would be paying 4.02% of the assessed value, and that's less than what they were paying prior to the 2018 assessment. It's slightly different for University Heights and the South Euclid taxpayers, although it's in the same range for those taxpayers on a percentage basis. We did hear questions in the last election about, are we the highest tax district? Right now, Garfield Heights taxpayers are paying 3.93% of market value. Shaker City is at 4%. If you live in Cleveland, but you are in Shaker Heights School District, you're at 4.04%. So a 5.6 mil levy does not make us the highest tax district in the state or the county, but it does put us up near the top, basically level with Shaker Heights. We'd be at 4.02. They're at 4 or 4.04, depending upon which part of the district you're talking about. Again, this is a lot. This is really about inflation. The inflation rate over the last 4 years has been 6.7%. And that includes a lot of the deflation we've seen in the last 2 months. When you look at the percentage increase in property taxes at 4.6 or 7.0, all we're really doing is making up for the inflation. I mean, that's really the name of the game in Ohio under House Bill 20. This slide shows my recommendations. I'll stop sharing my screen at this point, and would ask if there are any questions.
Brian, can I just make one statement? First of all, thank you so much for giving us all this information. It's a lot of material. I greatly appreciate it. I also wanted to let everyone know Mr. Hines had to leave around 8 o'clock due to a personal issue. So it's not an accident that he dropped off. He purposely had to leave.
Ryan, back on slide 37, when you're showing the cost for a homeowner.
Yes.
Are those monthly costs or those annual costs?
That's the annual cost. Mr. Gaynor, you want to confirm? Yes.
Yes, those are annual costs.
That's not the half, that's the full year. So you'd be paying, in your 2 tax payments, you'd be paying half of those amounts.
And your recommendation, or one of your issues, was possibly going down to 4.8 mils. Can I just proportionally just figure that out? I think it's 168.
That looks like it would be in the ballpark, Mr. Posh. I had not calculated that. I'm sure if you gave Mr. Gaynor about 3 minutes, he could.
Yeah. Okay. We can.
Yeah. Actually, I do have them for you, Jim. Because we anticipated that question. At 100,000, that'd be $168.
Okay, that's what I had.
At 150,000, that'd be $252. At 200,000, it'd be $336. And at 300,000, that'd be $504 annually.
I also want to thank the work of the committee. I was in all those meetings, and I appreciate your creativity in kind of coming up with some of these things and asking some tough questions. And I really think the presentation is very beneficial. I think it's something good that our community can actually dig through, and it really explains a lot of the things that we already know, but many who live in the community don't.
Well, it really drove home to me, if we don't pass a levy this fall, the types of cuts we'll be talking about will be unlike anything we've seen in this district since I've been here. I mean, I know there were some tough cuts made in 2015, 2016, and this, the cuts that would be necessary would outstrip those. So it's really Unfortunately, we were hoping there might be ways to delay in light of all the uncertainty, but it really is crucial to go on the ballot this time around in the view of the committee.
Well, I really appreciate all the information you shared with us. In light of the fact that it's a lot of information for us to digest, in light of the fact that Mr. Heinz had to leave early, I'm not prepared to take any kind of vote on a levy. I know we will need 2 readings if we decide to do that. And I know that we would need to have that done if we wanted to get something on the ballot by August 5th. But frankly, I need to digest this information. I need to think about it. I want to hear from some folks in the community, what they feel about it. I still, I don't want to see devastating cuts a year from now, but I'm also really concerned that so many people in our community are hurting. And regardless, we're going to have to make cuts. It's just the level of cuts is what I perceive.
Mr. Roth, I want to thank you and the committee for the work that you all did with your presentation. It appears that we are really between a rock and a hard place. Like I said, it's some good information you gave to the board, and hopefully the community will be able to view that as well. And we're going to just have to make some decisions. I mean, where do we go from here? But I thank you for the work that you did.
Thank you, Ms. Wright.
Mm.
So Jody, you're suggesting, okay, so typically what happens, or what's happened in the past, and I'm not saying that this is certainly what we need to be doing, but I mean, the typical model is around this time we would get a resolution together if we wanted to put a levy on the ballot. And I will state, I'm very reluctant about doing that, just for the record at this time. But we typically vote on something. If we are in agreement, then Scott would essentially take that information down to the county, get appropriate wording. 2 weeks later, a second reading would have to happen, which we would vote on. And then at that point, that gives the treasurer the authority to basically go to the Board of Elections and essentially put this on the ballot. We have, and Jody, I would agree with you. I mean, especially with Dan not here, and I'm really reluctant to doing anything unless we give it some more thought. But we do have a deadline if we do want to put anything on the ballot of, I believe, the first week in August.
August 5th. That's the deadline.
So we would have to have 2 meetings before then, and we would have to space them apart so Scott would be able to do his stuff. He'd have to get the amount certified by the county. So our next, I'm just trying to think logistically here how this would work.
Our next scheduled meeting is our work session that's on July 21st. So either we would have a meeting next week and the 21st, but that we're going to end up having to have a special meeting if we would decide to put something on the ballot. Because our only other option would be then to have one, the August 5th is a Wednesday, and I think it'd be cutting it a little close if we had a meeting on like the 3rd or the 4th. Because I believe, Scott, the county's only doing this by appointment now, right?
Yeah, that would be a little tight. So my recommendation would be, if you want to take some time to, pose questions to Ryan or to me, in the coming week or two, and get any feedback from the community. If you have your meeting on the 21st and then, are prepared to take action at that time, and then if the following week you had a follow-up meeting, so on the 28th, for example, then that would still give me a week in between those two to get the certification from the county, and that would still give me another week plus to get the reading down, to them by August 5th. So some kind of a scenario like that would work if that's what you're looking for.
1 week would be enough? with the county?
Yeah, they're pretty good with that. So as long as I made the appointment in advance, if I knew what the timing was going to be, I could talk to the county, and they really just need to certify the number that we use for the mill mods and that Ryan gave you tonight, of how much a levy raises and how much the proposed levy would raise. They just need to certify that number. So it's pretty quick.
All right, thank you.
So, I mean, I think it's impossible to make essentially $10 million in annual cuts so we can stay whole and still serve our students. There's just no way we can do that.
We wouldn't be serving our students.
Right.
Right.
I also think there is so much uncertainty trying to ask for a levy cycle that's beyond, I mean, the typical 3-year levy. I'm less reluctant to put something on the ballot if it is something in the short term. I mean, we're going to have to ride this COVID-19 issue out. Mm-hmm. We know that the state keeps on cutting us, but our expenses haven't changed. The last set of cuts that the state made gave us absolutely no time to make any changes to our expense lines. We are working, we're negotiating with our staff right now. The best we can do is a 1-year contract with what Scott is able to certify based on Ohio Revised Code. I mean, I think a lot of pieces have to come together here, otherwise it's going to fall apart. I do think we need to see the movements that we see in the salary and wages. We have to see some movement in our fringe benefits. I think we do have to make, as hard as it is, additional cuts on top of all these, such as the cuts that Dan he implied. He really didn't get a chance to really go into that, but I mean, if we were able to get another 2 million in cuts in addition to the 750, and we were able to get to the 4.9 in these trying times, you know, asking a community member to pass any levy is difficult, but having them pass the bare minimum that we can just try to, well, asking them to okay the bare minimum, I think is somewhat conscionable versus asking for 8 million later down the road or a double digit next year. So I think these are things that we need to reflect on as a board. And I'd feel better if we were all 5 of us discussing all these things together as opposed to just 4 of us. What do you guys think?
I am very worried about the, what's the word I want? The attraction of kicking the can down the road. We live in a world where it is very common not to take responsibility and just leave it to the future. And we're not in a position where we can even do that. We've got to do something. We have to do something right now. And, you know, that's terrifying. So, as I've said to several people, there is no right answer. We've got to just come up with the best approach that we think will work. And Ryan, I wanted to thank you also. This presentation is excellent, and it shows really how carefully your committee has looked at this from different directions, and that's very useful to us. Also very depressing.
Yeah, I certainly wish it was better news. And, you know, you guys are welcome to email me or Scott or any of the committee members, you know, this week. You know, feel free to reach out.
Well, I think that from my perspective, I know a double-digit levy at any time in the future is not palatable, even in good times. These are certainly not good times, and we don't know when there will be good times again. I think we should all really dig through this information. I think we should listen to our community members, and I think that we should plan to discuss this again, have it as an agenda item on our meeting on the 21st. And, you know, if at that point we decide we would need time for a second reading, then we could have it the following week. But I agree. I'm not prepared to make any decision tonight, particularly not when there's only 4 of us here.
I do have a couple other things to mention, I think. We do get emails from citizens, and there's a couple themes that those sort of, there's a very anti-tax crowd in this community. And the general feeling is, you know, starve the beast, they'll find a way to survive. And I am of the mindset, you know, that doesn't take our kids into consideration. And as I mentioned earlier, we not only have to look at the fiscal ramifications of our actions, but we also have to look at what those actions do to our children. A couple of things get thrown around. One of them is this performance audit. And I know it's been difficult for us to really find time and make it a priority to discuss. There's an erroneous feeling in the community that that is sort of the silver bullet. We do the performance audit, it solves all our problems, and all of a sudden our expenses are cut by $10 million or whatever it is. Well, that's not the reality of a performance audit. It's going to tell us where our costs are high. And I think the biggest one that I'm looking at right now in this 5-year forecast are the fringe benefits. I think that really needs some work. And I would like staff and our negotiating team to look at that when we are working and discussing our contractual obligations. I do want to also mention that one of the members who spoke to us earlier accused the board of not being fiscally responsible because we weren't part of the negotiations. Well, that's just dead wrong and not true. And even when we share that information with this particular individual, we are at the table right now as a board. I mean, legally we can't have all 5 of us at the table, but we can have 2 of us at the table, which we're doing. And we have a hired professional. We've always had a hired professional that represents us, who does bargaining that's their job. Bargaining is not our job. We're not experts in that. So we hire that out to an attorney that represents us as a school district. So I'd like to remind the community that we do have people bargaining on our behalf. I think we need to look at things like busing. I know this is problematic, and I'm real curious to see what Liz's opening plan is and if that has any discussion about busing. But I know in the meetings that Jody and I have with Liz, busing is extremely problematic because children are in a very tight space. You know, we've got to make some tough choices. But what if we just eliminated busing? What does that do? I know busing has worked well because we have difficulties getting kids to school on time, and busing assures that. We know the non-publics that use our busing services, they rely on the busing. But we're at a point where the state has cut our funding. We just can't. There's things that we are accustomed to being able to afford that we just can't, like the level of raises, some of the pickups, some of the fringe benefits, and on top of it, we're in this uncertain time, and I think this is the time where we're going to have to be real about our finances and try to balance those against the interests of our kids. So. Okay, I'm off my soapbox. I probably talked too much, and I apologize but
No, Jim, I think you're absolutely right. Our first responsibility has to be to the students, to our children. And yes, we have a fiscal responsibility to the community, but unfortunately, the education does have to take #1 spot. And so that's that's what's tearing me up, is how do we make the money work without destroying the education that we're providing our students? Because that $10 million is 100 teachers, roughly, right? I mean, that it's impossible to conceive of providing the level of education we do without that 100 teachers. So.
Well, we'll add this as another topic to our agenda on the 21st. I think we need to move on. Like we said originally, I'm a little uncomfortable having this discussion when there's only 4 of us, not our 5th board member. And I think we owe that to Mr. Heinz. So I'm going to move us on to the superintendent's report. And the next thing we have on the agenda is the second reading of Board Policy 5460, which is graduation requirements.
Thank you. I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Lombardo for this component of my report.
Good evening, everyone. At this time, this is the second reading of Board Policy 5460, graduation requirements. You may recall coming forward earlier in the year, and then there was a revision. This would be the second reading, and this is due by September 1st, so we are on track to meet the goal. At this time, again, no action needs to be taken by the board. It would just be a second reading. And if there are any questions, be happy to take those down at this time.
I don't have any questions. I asked my questions the last meeting. Does anyone else have any questions?
No questions.
No questions.
So we need to vote on this. I guess I should have asked for a motion to consider this. And
no, not this time. I'm sorry, Joey. This is just the second reading.
Okay, so we have 3 readings. All right, so will this be on our agenda for the work session, or will that wait to our regular meeting in August?
This will be the first week in August. So it'll be the August meeting, we'll take the vote, okay?
Okay, great, thank you.
All right, thank you.
So the next item is our draft reopening plan. So Liz?
Yep, so that is the next part of my report for tonight. And really this reopening has been the core work that we have all been engaged in this summer as we prepare to start school. And so Kathan is going to run the PowerPoint while we go through this presentation. One thing that I want to emphasize is that this is definitely a draft. So we know and anticipate that we will get lots of feedback as we share this with parents, as we share this with staff, and as we share this with other community stakeholders. But we wanted to provide you right now how we're thinking about what our start of school will look like, given the guidance that we've received, both from the state, but also we've been looking at a lot of national models and other state models as well. So tonight we're going to present that plan for the return of school. And then at the conclusion of the presentation, we'll have members of the cabinet answer questions. So Kate, then we can go to the 3rd slide. So we'll cover the context of our work. We'll talk about the planning timeline. We'll give you some updates on some of the things happening around the state as it relates to reopening. We'll share information about the composition of our committees, and then the cabinet will go through the elements of the draft plan. We'll follow up with questions, and we'll end with a timeline and then action items moving forward. So one piece that's really important to note, we have a set of core values that are really driving the way that we have conceived of this plan. Safety is critical and important. We know that we are in the times of a pandemic, and we want to make sure that everyone is safe as relates to what our restart will look like. Equity is also a consideration. We know that in the time that we're particularly in, different students will have different needs. And we're particularly concerned about students that struggled during the spring virtual learning environment. Collaboration is also really important, and for that reason, we have many different stakeholders in a variety of committees who have contributed to the models that we're going to be talking about tonight. We stay committed to academic excellence. So though we will not be in a traditional school model for all of our students, we want to make sure that we are providing them with a quality education that will allow them to be successful as they matriculate through the grades and also through our system. We also know that responsibility is important, and all partners play a role in terms of ensuring that we have student success. So we have responsibility on the parts of our teachers, our administrators, our community members, our parents. In particular, during this time, everyone is going to have to really work together so that we can execute on these models in a way that is safe and accomplishes all these goals. So that's a bit about our core values. We continue to be guided by the 5 goals of our strategic plan. And again, that's another strain of work we've been working on. We will still use those goals as we go into the 2025 school year. We also used the planning guide from the state of Ohio. Now that was released towards the end of our initial kind of planning phase, but we've used that just to make sure that we're in alignment with some of the recommendations. And I want to note recommendations has been the position of the state of Ohio. They are not making any mandates on anything for schools and school districts. And then finally, this draft plan was informed by multiple surveys with families and staff. We're relying heavily on the survey model in order to get information about how people are experiencing these times we are living in and what they want to see as we move forward. And we will continue with that engagement and other ways to also get feedback from stakeholders. So when we look at the planning timeline, just to give you a context of where we've been, we started to establish our planning committees in May, and we began to send out surveys in June as we were closing out the school year. We have planning documents that were drafted by administrators during the month of June and early July. And then we had a draft plan that was presented to our advisory group. So we have an advisory committee that is looking at all the different recommendations coming out of the planning committees that are leading this work. We shared that draft plan with them last week, and today we're presenting to you all our first draft plan. We will continue to revise this plan as we get more feedback. And also, quite frankly, because it's an ever-changing situation, we know that we'll have to be nimble and make adjustments as the health situation changes and hopefully improves in the state of Ohio. Professional development is planned in August for staff, where we do have a draft calendar out there so that we have more time for that. And then if the calendar is approved, school will be starting for students September 2nd. So in terms of updates, I'll go through this really fast. Again, I noted that we do have a proposed draft for a calendar. We've talked about that in previous board meetings. There's a link here to the planning guide from the state of Ohio for folks' references. And also, in terms of remote learning legislation, we have an opportunity to apply to offer remote learning this year. This is something that was part of some legislation coming out of Columbus. We'll be submitting that by July 31st. And also, the Department of Education also is allowing districts to use and utilize blended learning models this year. And that notice will be submitted to the Department of Education by November 1st, because that will be key to the instructional models that we're going to share tonight. So I'm going to ask now Assistant Superintendent Gould to work through the committee process and to talk through the different components and folks that we have on this work. We know this is particularly important because we definitely really value this collaboration, and we need the voices and the different perspectives as we think through what this will look like. So I will turn it over to Felicia, and then from here you can go right into the Ed Services side of the house.
Thank you so much, Superintendent Kirby, and thank you, board members, for allowing us to come before you this evening to discuss our draft reopening plan. We know in order to do this work that this cannot be done in isolation. So immediately to think about the reopening process, the educational and business and operations departments began to meet together collaboratively to talk about what groups needed to meet and who did we need to obtain information from. So we started out with two large groups, the elementary committee and a secondary committee. And these two committees were comprised of both the educational components and the business services components, as well as with teachers and also support staff. They began to meet weekly to talk about what plans should look like, to talk about focus areas, as well as things that needed to be addressed, and challenged us with some very challenging questions for us to think about. Then there were other subcommittees that needed to take place in order to help us answer a few questions. We not only had in-house subcommittees, but we had individuals who also served at regional areas as well, such as Allison Bird serving at the state level for data and assessment. There are other regional meetings that were held at the ESC for like peers in our departments, such as human resources, people services, safety and security. Those were held at the regional level. But as you can see here on this slide, there are several committees that added to our plan: assessment, counselors, curriculum, athletics, IT, which would be looking at distance learning, school climate, registration, pre-K. There was not a stone unturned when we looked at committees to help us look at our draft reopening plan. Now, moving into the educational services, our goal is definitely to provide high quality education to all of our students, pre-K through 12, in this very unknown and trying time. We, as Superintendent Kirby has alluded, that we definitely wanted to make sure that health and safety was put at the forefront, and also making sure that we gather feedback in order to gain a clear understanding of what needed to take place. So we would like to take a look at some of the survey results that we received from our family in order to prepare our plan. So there were several questions that we asked our families, and we started out asking our families if they were in favor of us returning on September 2nd based on our proposed calendar, in order to provide teachers with an opportunity to do professional development. The majority of 81% of the respondents answered yes, while 6.8 said no, and 12.2 had no preference at all in regards to the return date. Our family, our next question was, we wanted to know, what was the most important safety precaution that they wanted us to take a look at based on COVID-19. Regularly disinfecting classrooms received the most responses, followed by a breakdown of hand washing and sanitizing. And there were several write-in answers that included strict monitoring for symptoms, smaller class sizes, and a continuation of online learning. Our next question was, if it was safe to return in the fall, how comfortable are you with sending your student back to school? Noting that the scale from 1 to 5, 1 being not comfortable and 5 being completely comfortable. On average, most respondents, 30.8%, answered they feel somewhere in the middle with a 3 rating. Meanwhile, 21% said that they did not feel comfortable at all, and 16.7% said they feel completely comfortable. And if we were required to do a blended learning model of instruction due to health concerns and restrictions, which model of instruction would you prefer for your child? On average, the majority, 70.6%, answered alternating days within the week, which would be 2 to 3 days at school and 2 to 3 days at home. 18.9% answered alternating weeks, full week at school and full week at home. And there were several write-in answers that included neither, 5 days a week, or 100% online. We then asked if you were not open to either in-person or blended learning model this fall, were you interested in having your child participate fully online for the next school year? On average, most respondents answered 42% no, 35.3% answered yes, and 22.7% answered maybe. And so we ended up with the educational implications to start looking at our model, and nearly 37% were not comfortable returning in person this fall, and approximately 63% were moderately comfortable or completely comfortable. A total of 81% were in favor of starting in the school year on September 2nd. And approximately 30 to 60% are interested in online learning, depending on what type of model would be offered for that. Parents highly valued the regular disinfecting of classrooms and definitely the breaks for hand washing and sanitizing that we've seen in several of the CDC models. Now, based on the survey results, we'll start talking about our instructional models. And we'll start first with exactly what the blended learning model means.
Good evening, board members. This is Bob Swigert. Let me just turn my camera on so everybody can see me. Good evening. We wanted to talk about the instructional model, which is blended. And a blended learning approach by definition means that students have some element of control over the time, place, path, or pace of their learning. And that's combined with learning in person in a supervised environment. We would typically call that school. So when we think about our blended learning approach, we are combining that in-person instruction 2 days a week with an element of learning that takes place when students are away from the school setting. And as you can see, we've broken this down into an A group and a B group to help offset some of the student numbers in each building that are occupying that space, and thinking about allowing for more easily accomplishing the CDC guidelines for social distancing. So as you can see, Group A, the student Group A, which is based on the alphabet, I believe that the breakdown would look at A through K, would be in Group A. So they would learn at school on Monday and Tuesday. Wednesday would provide for the first part of that remote learning. So students are learning at home, support services would be provided, and then they would continue their at-home learning on Thursday and Friday. Alternately, we would think about Group B, which would start the week off learning at home. That would be for students having last names K through Z. And then we would also have them learn at home. Wednesday would be that transition day that would support some of the social emotional needs that students have. It also would help support with some of the cleaning that would need to take place, and also thinking about the planning that teachers would need to do, or IEP meetings. And then Thursday and Friday, those students would be in person at their school site. Both the in-person and online instruction will be created and curated by the CHUH teachers. And of course, those additional district resources would be used to help support teaching and learning that encourages personalization for each student. In a blended learning model, students would attend school for that face-to-face instruction led by our support staff and our teachers, and then they would be engaged with learning new content and completing assignments via an online platform, remote instruction, and/or distance learning. So if an emergency closure is required, students would continue to meet virtually on their assigned in-person instructional days.
So taking a look at the different models for pre-K and then K through 12, we'll talk a little bit about these. For pre-K, we are looking at a project-based learning because this is where students are looking at their personalized learning and their success. We would be looking at Oxford Preschool would be temporarily closed due to low enrollment. 9 students per room, 5 students with special needs and 4 peers, so that there is a true inclusion model that is taking place. Monday through Friday from 8:30 to 11, and 12:30 to 3. So we would be looking at an AM and a PM opportunity for students. Wednesdays are teachers' planning time and meetings. Normally this day occurred on Monday, and now it would be moving to Wednesday. To shorten these sessions, we would be looking at half an hour in between the sessions in order to bring about the sanitation and cleaning that needed to take place, as well as preparing needed materials for instruction for the next section. These hours, based on the AM and PM blended model of instruction, still meet the requirements for special education, our early childhood, and the universal pre-K preschool requirements. Taking a look at the K-12 model for blended instruction. Education that would take place, we are still looking at doing Ohio Learning Standards and the 4 learning domains outlined by the state of Ohio in their strategic plan. Students would be attending school in the A and B group that Bob has shared. In the A group, we would be looking at students with last names A through K, and group B, last names L through Z. Virtual Wednesday is an opportunity for us to support those students who need additional assistance, as well as look at cleaning our classrooms, videotaping lessons, and holding any meetings that would need to take place, such as IEP meetings, TBTs, teacher-based team meetings, building leadership team meetings, student intervention meetings, and any meetings that would need to take place with parents. The exception to this model is that students receiving special education services in intensive classrooms, such as our multiple disabilities class, our emotional disturbance classes, and autism classes, would attend school 5 days a week, as opposed to the 4-day model for the last name cohorts. The health and safety of the proposed model allows for the social distancing measures that we must follow. It has been recommended in the Reset Restart Planning Guide that students in grades 3 through 12 are recommended to wear face masks. Employees will wear face coverings that will allow for instruction, and hand washing and regular cleaning protocols will be implemented with the model. And now we'll move into looking at our virtual models.
So we do know that based on survey results that a one-size-fits-all approach was not going to work in CHUH. And so we did come up with some alternatives to really address some of the concerns that were raised by parents and students and staff. So our instructional model number 2, which is a virtual alternative, is called My School Online. And this model is designed for students and families who want to have that connection back to their CHUH teachers, but don't feel comfortable sending their students back to a traditional school building this coming fall. Parents can rely on teachers in the My School Online to facilitate and guide student learning. Students will have scheduled times with in-person class meetings and digital resources and assignments that can be completed at home or at school if circumstances change throughout the year. The learning model for the My School Online provides families the flexibility to choose an instructional model to meet the needs of their students during the uncertain times of COVID, and reflects CHUH commitment to providing a high quality instructional experience no matter what the setting. So you can see based on some of the characteristics on this screen, with My School Online, students attend remotely. They follow the standard school schedule and bell times. And this learning model incorporates a lot of the positive feedback that we had from parents and students about our instruction this past spring, which is regular virtual real-time interaction with teachers every day for every class. So this really is in-person instruction that just takes place in a remote setting, but it's real time. We also have a third model, which is for students that need some additional flexibility. And so the full online school is really geared towards students who wish to have more control over their learning path and pace, and for whom a flexible daily schedule is critical. Bob Model number 3.
Oh, I think did he freeze?
I think am I back?
Yes, you're back.
Sorry about the poltergeist. I apologize for that. But this is a commitment that families would need to make to choose a full online version. And that really is around saying for the semester or for a year that they are going to commit to this. It also requires that an identified adult would be serving as the partner with the online teachers by serving as the learning guide for each student. And that's especially critical as we think about a whole online program at the elementary school level, where we know it's so critical to have that interaction. Students participating in a fully virtual online alternative are still required to participate in state testing and data collection for the district. And so we would make sure that they still had access to providing those assessments and those assessment results. This model may or may not be staffed completely by CHUH teachers. So I think we've talked in some of the work groups that this is through a partnership with our ESC. This is a fully public school. It just happens to be online. Students would be retained in CHUH. This is not something where they would have to transfer to a different educational institution. And then they would also still maintain that connection to CHUH with all of the other wonderful programming that we offer here in CHUH. And then there's model number 4, which we're continuing to investigate and really try to think about what does it look like to try and offer K-5 instruction full in-person 5 days a week for interested parents, knowing that some of those survey results really did talk about how are we making sure that we provide that high quality instructional experience for students, and many of them might need it 5 days a week in person. So what we're looking at right now in order to understand this is investigating available square footage at each building to think about how we might be able to accommodate social distancing, room and space utilization, maybe even thinking about some of those bigger spaces and trying to reconfigure them into classroom spaces, and then also the available personnel. So in order to try and gauge parent and student interest in these different things, the first step is taking some action today and looking at presentation, trying to get those options out there so people can understand what we are going to offer. We're also thinking about looking at understanding transportation and understand if families are going to take advantage of district transportation for this upcoming school year. So we need to collect that information. We also need for families to let us know which model of the ones that are presented or the ones that we might continue to present as we learn more. We're going to need parents to choose one of the alternatives, the virtual alternatives, if they are choosing not to participate in the blended learning process or the blended learning model. We're asking for that window to be considered from July 9th to the 24th. That way we can take time from July 24th until August when teachers return to plan for professional development, making sure that our teachers are aware of the model that they would be teaching in, and then making sure by August 14th that we would be ready to give teacher assignments and have them being ready to set up their classrooms, whether they're virtual or in person.
And we know that we can't do this without having professional development. So we have shared here a timeline between August and September that training will take place for our staff. For the Leadership Academy, this is a Leadership Academy for our principal leaders and their building leadership teams that will take place in early August. Definitely, we will have new teacher orientation, August 17th through the 19th. Then there's site-based planning that needs to take place at the actual building with principals and their staff. And then we're looking at our professional development days that we're proposing in our calendar for the 24th through the 27th. This would encompass everything from our learning models, our social emotional support, equity, and all of those things that need to happen. And then definitely taking a look at our protocols and procedures that we will have to work with staffs in regard to how they will handle things in the building, visitors coming to the building, as well as our grade level and department meetings. Also on August 31st through September 1st, we are looking to work with those students who were also non-participants in our Tier 3 instruction as well. And now we will move into the human resources and operations portion, and I will turn it over to Dr. Lombardo.
All right, thank you, Ms. Gould. Human resources and operations. We want to ensure that we have human operational and fiscal resources to support and provide a high quality education. Again, safety is very important as we move through these different models and move into next year. There were some staff survey results that we want to go over. In June, the district distributed a fall planning survey to staff, and we did receive 532 responses, about approximately half of the staff. The majority, 69.2, who work in the buildings. So there were certified staff for about, again, 69.2, and you'll see the breakdown of some of the other staff members that did reply. We did ask, are you in favor of starting school in September? And you'll see that 83.2% were in favor. There was a small percentage that said no, and 12.5% had no preference. Another question was, assuming that health and safety precautions in place were in line with state and federal guidance, how comfortable are you with coming back to returning to school? This was the staff response. Nearly 30 of the responses said that they felt somewhat in the middle. That would be a 3 rating. Meanwhile, 21.5 said they did not feel comfortable at all. 9.2 said that they feel completely comfortable. We are going to be working through the model, as you'll see in the presentation, to try to unpack what those concerns are and how we can help deal with that as well. What measures do you think are most important to maintain safety? And this does fall in line with a lot of what the parents did say. 94.7% about disinfecting classrooms. Social distancing was next. Breaks for hand washing and sanitizing. The wearing of masks, 80%. And students wearing of masks, about 77%. So as we look through this school climate, there are a number of areas that we are touching upon. And when you get the presentations, you can click on the link. Those are just some posters that we're going to be making sure that are displayed in all the buildings. But face coverings are a #1 priority. K through 12, we'll be asking them to wear those face coverings each day. And create a face covering policy for the board. And that was per the Ohio Reset and Restart Education Planning Guide. Neola, as you know, we bring forth policies all the time. Neola is working on a face covering policy that they'll be able to present to the board. Students are going to be required to bring their own mask. And staff, we are going to be giving face shields. One of our teachers is going to be making face shields for all our staff members to wear. We do want people to conduct daily health self-assessment by employees and students. I know there was some talk about taking temperatures. We're not recommending temperature taking, but we are recommending that people assess themselves. And if you have 2 or more of these symptoms, these are symptoms that can be related to COVID-19. Doesn't mean you have it, but you want to check to make sure if you have fever or chills, coughs, shortness of breath, fatigue, muscle or body aches, loss of taste or smell, headaches, sore throat, congestion, runny nose, nausea or vomiting, or even diarrhea. So again, if you're not feeling well, we will encourage you to stay home and not come to school. Make sure you wash and sanitize hands frequently to prevent the spread. There'll be hand sanitizer, soaps will be available in classrooms and all occupied spaces. And we will be having hand washing breaks throughout the day. And we hear it all the time, but it's good practice and we need to be practicing social distancing which is 6 feet apart. As far as employees and guests, we will continue to provide, we will continue to have minimum of 6 feet apart. Face coverings are going to be required to be worn around office areas and the district. And we're going to limit access to visitors and volunteers as they come into the building. We want to make sure that these are essential, that people need to come to the building for them to be in our buildings. We are going to do frequent disinfection of our work and physical stations. And if there are confirmed cases, we'll have immediate isolation. So we're going to be working with the principals and the nurses at the building level to make sure we have an area for everyday emergencies or things that students need to be in. And then we'll have another place for isolation and quarantine based on the CDC guidelines for if any COVID-19 cases are suspected. We will follow the protocols of CDC, call the county health, disinfect, seek medical care. And a big thing is trainings. We're going to have our in-person trainings, as Ms. Gould said, during those days, but we are going to be creating some videos so that we'll have ongoing training of videos of what it looks like to make sure you have your masks on or getting on a bus, those types of videos. And as far as quarantine with CDC guidelines, I pulled this out so that people can understand what CDC is recommending. So what does it mean to be in close contact with someone who has COVID-19? What counts as close contact? Because you hear different ideas of what this means. You're within 6 feet of someone who has COVID-19 for at least 15 minutes. You provide care at home to someone who is sick with COVID-19. You had direct physical contact with the person. You shared eating or drinking utensils. People have sneezed, coughed, or you have respiratory droplets on you. And we want people to stay home, monitor your health. They say within 14 days, you should be able to come back and stay away from high-risk people. On the human resources, we've been getting a lot of feedback about staff coverage and substitutes, as well as employee COVID-19 related concerns. So as far as our substitutes, we're working with Wren Hill, who is our substitute provider, to work on recruiting, retaining, and engaging those substitutes to stay in our district. We are going to try to capitalize on the fact that we have people out there that may be seeking employment, and we're going to be holding recruitment fairs, 2 in July and 2 in August. We're going to be partnering with Wren Hill. Information will be going out, and the idea is to find people around our area that wants to sub in our district in all our different positions. As far as accommodations, we want to learn and address the employee COVID-19 related concerns. I'm going to be reaching out to all the union presidents to work out the best way to tackle all the concerns that are coming in from the different unions. And then we do have an accommodation procedure that we have followed that we're going to continue to follow. The HR department carefully reviews any requests. We consult with the employees, we consult with the employee physicians, as well as the supervisors to see if there are accommodations that we can move forward with. As far as technology, we're trying to eliminate the barriers of student success while advancing digital equity here. Our lead, Dr. Christy Bauer, has been doing a great job working with a subgroup, not only with the HR and operations side, but also as well as the ed services side. And we're happy to say that we're going to be able to provide 1 Chromebook for every K-12 student. Touchscreen Chromebooks are on order for the K-1 students at this time. We want to provide additional Wi-Fi hotspots for households that need it and identify through the back to school online forms. And we were able to actually provide hotspots as we started this COVID situation back in March. We are looking to order cases so students can safely transport those Chromebooks between school and home. And we're going to build out learning management systems to support the My School Online virtual option that Mr. Swagger talked about. and currently using Google Integrated Gradebook Infinite Campus, which connects with attendance. And now I'm going to turn it over to George Peckek, who will talk about the cleaning and safety of the buildings.
Good evening, board members. Our goal is to ensure we develop and implement operational protocols in areas of facilities, food, service, transportation aligned to operating schools during a pandemic. We've had numerous individuals that have been involved in discussions and planning that have really put in some time. So ensuring cleanliness, schools are cleaned and disinfected daily utilizing the building standards. They have been utilizing the building standards for years, and we plan on continuing to use that. They address disinfecting daily. Inspections are conducted and documented twice daily by building custodians. That's also part of the building standards. They're required, the head custodian, when he arrives in the morning, he's required to conduct a random inspection at some point in the school. And the assistant custodian at night is also required to conduct a random inspection. We plan on increasing those inspections to make sure that the cleaning is being conducted. The implementation of cleaning and sanitizing. Of course, all touch surfaces will be cleaned throughout the school day by the custodial staff. We plan on having spray bottles with disinfectant and paper towels available in each classroom for use by the teacher. Training, Nichols Paper and Supply Company. It used to be Dawn Chem. It was taken over by Nichols. They will be providing the district with virtual and in-person refresher training for our cleaning staff on procedures for disinfecting in our schools. So we're in the process of developing that plan, but we plan on having numerous training opportunities throughout the summer. The procurement of supplies, we've been working on this for the last couple months. All the district's hand soap and hand sanitizer will be changed over to Purell for the start of the new school year. An inventory will be conducted of the spaces that will need plexiglass separations for employees, and the devices will be ordered in July. 1,100 will be made by Heights High engineering teacher Greg Nachman and paid for by the district. He has volunteered to help us make that happen, and he's saving us around $1.25 per face shield. We currently have 7,000 face masks available, which will be distributed to the schools to issue to students who forget or do not have a mask. We will be ordering child-sized face masks shortly. We currently have 13 no-touch thermometers that were purchased for the custodial staff to use, and we will be ordering more for use at the schools if needed. So food service. The lead is Anjali Rosedale. She's our food service resident director, and the recommendation currently for the K through 5 is that students eat breakfast and lunch in the classrooms. Breakfast can be served to students as they enter the school. That's the plan. For lunch, students should come to the cafeteria maintaining social distancing, pick up a meal, and return to their classrooms to eat. And we're also investigating if K through 2 can eat lunch in the cafeteria. Again, all this is being planned based on square footage. Ms. Rosedale has already went through each building, and we're developing what the seating will look like. The recommendation for 6 through 12 is that students eat breakfast in the classrooms and lunch in the cafeteria. Breakfast can be served to students as they enter the school. Middle schools will require more tables to be added in the cafeterias, and the high school will need lunch periods added or shortened to accommodate. And take-home meals, students that are not in school, we need to remember the students that are not in school will have to be offered meals and lunch at the similar to what we're doing now, like a grab and go, because we're required by law to offer meals. So we'll make plans on a Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday plan that we have meals available for students to pick up. And on Wednesday, it'll be similar to what we're planning right now. And that's all students could come to school and have a take-home meal. Transportation. Mr. Smith, supervised transportation, has been and currently working on a variety of different options for us. Surveying eligible parents regarding transportation use within the next week is so important for him. He should have already had bus routes developed. That's typically done the first week of July. He's finished with it. So it's going to be very important for us to get final data from parents that do wish to take transportation. He's investigating routes per proposed facility plan. Students may have to be shuttled to and from schools early in order to maintain distance. And again, since the state has not made any, this is the way you will operate. Right now we're basing social distancing on a bus, 1 child per seat. Of course, that's not 6 feet separation. But if we did go with 6 feet separation, we could not transport students. So we're planning on it now as 1 child per seat. All students would wear masks.
Let me just, I'm gonna jump in here because this could definitely change. This is expensive, number one. Number two, we have no guidance, radio silence from the Department of Education on transportation. There are some districts that are doing 2 kids per seat. We may have to offer that, explaining to the parents, you know, our capabilities, just given the fiscal challenges that we have. There's been no guidance from the state, and I know Jimmy asked a question about this, which is why I'm bringing it up. It's still radio silence on transportation. 1 child per seat is preferable, but we may not be able to do that. There are other districts I know who may not be able to do that. We won't be alone in that. So I just wanted to give that caveat. Sorry, George.
That's okay. Thank you, Liz. So safety when riding the bus, we recommend all students riding the bus wear a mask. Believe we're going to recommend that be mandatory. Parents, guardians should be checking students' temperature before departing to the bus stop, along with washing hands. Parents and guardians and students will be responsible for maintaining proper distancing at the bus stops. There's no district person standing there, so we're going to rely on the parents to have their students do that. School loading and unloading will be completed in a timely, organized manner, keeping students as physically spaced as possible, which could be problematic at elementary schools if you watched students get on and off buses. Considerations also may have difficulty supporting athletic trips due to social distancing of students on daily routes. So trips cannot interfere with daily to and from school routes per Ohio Revised Code, which means if we are in the middle of transporting students, we can't divert to, of course, we wouldn't divert to take an athletic trip in place of that. Busing for non-public schools that are planning a full return for all students 5 days a week. Right now, that could be problematic. If our private schools are planning on returning Monday through Friday, it ties up buses if we need them in a different manner. So Scott knows more about that approach, but we're also checking with legal. Can we ask our private schools to, or force our private schools to adhere to our expectations Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday? Additional cost, interior bus signage, hand sanitizer, additional cleaning supplies, and time for cleaning. These are all additional considerations. The state has waived. We can't put hand sanitizers on a bus. And our hope would be that a student getting on the bus would hit the hand sanitizer and sit down. And we know that we would be starting the day with, at least with clean hands. So I'm trying to acquire hand sanitizers that we can place on the buses. And county social distancing guidelines can affect bus routing. So if someone comes out from the county or from the state and says, this is what we have to do, it could affect our routing.
All right, I guess I'm up next. I have one quick slide here. Most of this we've discussed already in the previous presentations, but just to note that as we think about all of this and try to remain as cost neutral as possible, that we do have a dire financial situation. Again, talking about the failed operating levy, additional ed choice losses, that $1.4 million in state cuts annually. Also noting that we have that $9 million deficit in the 21-22 school year, The 5-year forecast and the fact that the federal CARES money that we've received has already been utilized to offset state funding cuts in the 1920 school year. And that more information will be available based on family selection and transportation. So again, you know, we've already talked a lot about the financial situation during the course of the evening, but just wanted to make sure that that was noted in this presentation as well, that we are working with some pretty severe fiscal constraints as we move forward.
Good evening, everyone. This is Kate Kavanaugh, Supervisor of Communications. So our goal for the Communications Department heading into the 2020-2021 school year is that we provide clear, consistent information regarding the reopening plan while also providing opportunities for stakeholder feedback. So we're going to use several tools to accomplish this goal. One main one is our website, chuh.org. So tomorrow I will be posting the recorded video of this presentation as well as the supporting slide deck to the website, along with a Google form where our families and other stakeholders can submit their feedback and comments. I am also in the process of creating a reopening landing page on our website, kind of similar to the COVID-19 page that we used during school and in the months that followed. My goal is to get this rolling by the end of July, and I will also post COVID and reentry news to chuh.org as usual. We'll of course be using social media to get this information out. So we plan on doing at least 2 Facebook Live events before school starts. One is planned for July 14th, and we'll put out information about a time here shortly. So again, that's July 14th, and that'll give people some time to review the plan. And then we'll do another one in August with the date to be determined for that. And of course, our Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram accounts will also serve as news sources as usual. So as far as physical signage goes, as Paul mentioned, we have protocol signs displayed throughout all buildings. They will be displayed throughout all of the schools, and they're currently on display at the Board of Education. We also have a few ways of contacting families more directly. So that includes our phone banking initiative, in which we contact each of our families by phone. We've done this twice so far, and we plan on doing this again as needed over the summer and also after school starts so that we can get a sense of where families are and how they're doing. As usual, we'll be sending out recorded robocalls from Liz or others as necessary. And finally, I'm excited to announce that we'll be rolling out a new district app in August. So this app will help us push important communication as the year goes on. And as far as marketing goes, I will be working with Mr. Swaggart and his team on communicating our new online program to families. So we'll do that in a few ways, including our traditional communications, such as our website and email, as well as we're exploring the possibility of mailing information to households as well.
I'll talk through this last slide before we go to questions. This captures some of the things we'll be doing this summer, but there'll be some ongoing engagement things we'll be doing as well. It's really important for us to know the interest of families in the different options. And to that end, we will get clarity on the ability to do the K-5 in-person model as an option of families. When we looked at the footprint, it looked like we had this space, especially taking into consideration that about 20% of families do not at this point wish for their kids to come back. So we should be able to accommodate them. But we also have to look at the personnel needs and if there would be any additional costs given the ways that we will be using the building. I will note that Mayfield City Schools, for example, is having their entire district return back in person. And like our thinking, they're using every inch of their buildings in order to offer that option to families. So we'll be engaging in enrollment through the month of July. Also in the month of July, we'll have the vote for the board approval for the new calendar. Again, the landing page and information, the Facebook Live events. And then we'll continue to engage with our committees. So this is work that we are engaged in with every day. So hearing back, we know we'll get some feedback from this presentation from parents and from teachers and from community members. And so we want to take that into account as we continue to refine And then the biggest unknown is this question of transportation. And so we'll, unfortunately, we're in a position, Scott's in a position where he's planning multiple models just because it's so opaque right now in terms of what guidance will be given. The state has said that there's some guidance coming, but they've been saying that, for a couple of months now on that. So I know it's a contentious issue across the state, so I do understand why it may have taken a little long, but we know we need that information. So that concludes our presentation of our draft. And I want to say again, our draft reopening plan, I know it's a lot of information to digest, but let's now open it up to board members for discussion.
Well, I took a lot of notes. First of all, I want to thank the staff for putting together such a comprehensive plan. I know it was a lot of work. I've served on some of the committees. So the first thing that I just wanted to make a comment on, because we did hear this in some of the public comments, was, if it's, we're holding our meetings online and, if we're going to be opening our buildings, what does that say? Well, I think that we're going to need a plan for how we start having our meetings in public, probably in person in the August timeframe. I mean, we've got a little bit of time, but we need to work that out. I do wholeheartedly support the suggestion or the guidance that students should wear masks. I think that that's important. It's my own personal feeling on that based on everything that I've read. I like the approach that we've got, a variety of approaches, and we're still working through those and figuring that out. I think that that's really, really important. I do have a question about if we did the blended model and we have kids going by alphabet, if there's a confirmed case, how are we going to manage that? Is then that whole, are we going to do some contact tracing, or how are we going to quarantine, big groups of students? And I don't know if you have an answer on that right now.
There are protocols that are in place when you do have a positive case. We experienced that recently with one of the student athletes. And so we would contact the health department, provide that information, and then they give guidance based upon contact, in the space of contact, those same guidelines that Paul outlined. So it could be a situation if it's a student. And one thing around some of the models, we haven't gotten deep into this, but I know some schools have thought about cohorting students. So if there's a positive case with a group of students, you have the same students who've been together, so it can kind of minimize some of the spread and some of the risk as well. But right now, we definitely would follow the Board of Health guidelines as relates to contact, and then they let you know who, what the next steps need to be with those students and contact those families.
Okay, and then as far as the transportation, I know we're hoping to have one child per seat. I assume, and I'd like to get detail on this, that if it's siblings who live together, that then we could have students sitting together.
Mm-hmm.
Scott, Scott was hoping for that to.
And then for loading and unloading, I know you mentioned that, that can be difficult to keep social distancing for elementary school kids. And I just want to note that I think it's really difficult for middle school kids too, having observed that process a number of times when my own son was in middle school. I also just wanted, and I'll get through all my stuff and then I'll let everybody else speak. I also just wanted to make a note that when we talk about the additional ed choice losses, this was in Mr. Gaynor's presentation, I believe those are not kids leaving our school district. Those are siblings of kids who have never been in our school district. So this is either the incoming kindergartners or maybe high school students that, have spent their whole career in other school districts, or not in other school districts, in private or non-public schools. So I just wanted to make that point so people don't think we have this mass exodus of students, because that's not what's happening. These are kids who were never in our budget, which is why it makes it really hard to make reductions, because you can't reduce what was never there. I did have a question about how difficult would it be for students to move from online to blended or blended to online? I mean, say a student or a family decides to start the school year in one way, but maybe partway through or a couple months in, they think another model might be better for them. Is there a way that students would be able to move from one to the other if needed?
So I think that moving from blended to the My Online School would be a little bit easier. When we think about that full online school, which really is more computer driven, we would ask for a commitment to stay in that model for at least a semester, or if not the full year. But we would at least try to accommodate parents, because we know that there is going to be some reason to move. We might have to put some parameters in about when that could occur, and have some transition points in order for that to be most efficient.
Okay, thank you. Because I know it's a fluid situation. I mean, the case count can be very different today versus what it could be a month from now. And you know, somebody starts one way, they might want to switch. And then my last question, I promise, and I'll let the rest of my fellow board members speak. But I know we're talking about if we do the blended learning on the alphabet groupings, will there be an opportunity for families to apply or ask to be in a different group than what they're originally assigned? You know, not that they would go back and forth, but it would be a one-time, like, you know, maybe like, for instance, families where maybe children have different last names, and one's at the beginning of the alphabet and one's at the later part of the alphabet, so their children are all going together. Or if a parent has like a work schedule situation and they say, hey, I really need to be at work these times, you know, I need my kid to go the other days. Is there going to be a process for that to make those accommodations for families?
Yes, Ms. Sereni, accommodations have been made in the plan in regards to just what you said, for siblings who have different last names, to make sure they're in the same cohort. And then if there are families who elect to be in the A or B cohort, they're working that out at the building level.
Okay, thank you. I am done with all of my questions, so I will let my fellow board members jump in. Thank you for being patient with me.
Oh, good evening. I have a question regarding temperature taking for students and faculty or staff when they come into the building. I noticed that you won't be doing that. Or can someone elaborate on that, or as to why? Was it a CDC recommendation? Are the parents supposed to do it before the child, you know, leaves from home to go to school? How come we're not doing it on our end? That's my question.
Yeah, we just from a practical standpoint, as far as trying to make sure that we take everyone's temperature every time they enter the building would probably be a very tough situation. We have actually talked with Metro Health as well, and some of the professionals are recommending that people self-check themselves as they come in. We are going to have thermometers in the building. George is going to buy more for the building. So we will have an opportunity to check temperatures if we feel it's necessary, or if kids aren't feeling well, or if adults aren't feeling well. But the recommendation, even from the state, is not a mandatory temperature check as they come in the buildings, but that people self-check themselves for those symptoms of COVID-19.
Thank you.
Beverly, are you all done?
Yeah.
So I have concerns about internet access. So if 3 out of 5 days we're relying on our students to be connected to their teacher, we really need to make sure that they have internet access. And you know, I've seen all different pieces of data that measure the amount of connectivity that our parents have. Do we have any good numbers available to us? I mean, I know the fallback is providing a gizmo or a router to a family to give them a hotspot, but will we have enough of those?
The survey that was done, Mr. Posh, revealed to us that 95% of our families that replied to the survey said that they have reliable Wi-Fi. And we did purchase routers for our families, as well as we also provided our families with additional devices if they had more than one student in their household to accommodate our Tier 3 implementation. And as we also shared in the plan, that we will be purchasing devices for all of our students. So 95% of our parents said that they had reliable Wi-Fi based on our family survey.
Yeah, I see that. And I'm just really worried that if that's 2/3 of our families, the 1/3 of our families are probably families that don't respond to surveys. And they're probably the folks that may not have internet access. I just think it's something that we have to be cautious about when we're moving forward with this. I mean, I don't see any other alternative, but we may need additional resources in order to bump that up.
Yeah, we can make that a part of the registration process because we anticipate we will get more completion of that outreach to parents, because it'll be really about them choosing what school will look like for their child next year. When we did the phone banking, we called families who we hadn't heard from and walked through the survey with them. So some of that does reflect families who might, to that question on do they have internet access and was that a barrier in survey completion? But we'll have another chance. So we'll continue the phone banking to reach out to families so we can find out their needs.
Okay, thanks. Now I know the 5-year forecast is an evolving document, and this is somewhat of a new plan. I think we're going to have to build some additional costs into that to deal with substitutes, how we're going to deal with sick days. I mean, I think if we didn't include already enough, I got the impression that we were short in our budget line for the number of substitutes this past year, or we expected some savings because we didn't feel like we'd need subs in the last half of the year because of the epidemic. But I'm a little bit concerned that we're going to have to add to that and figure out a way that, how we are using sick days and what's allowable and what's not allowable. I don't need a response right now. I'm just throwing that out there. I think that this is a good plan. It's a good plan based on sort of this thought that the state of Ohio wants to reopen really badly. And there's an expectation mostly down with Southern Ohio districts that it's okay to open. But I'm very fearful what happens if we run into a situation where we do a full closure again. So this is where we're closing our buildings to students just because we haven't essentially flattened the COVID-19 curve. So I would like your thoughts about this. It seems to me that this plan can evolve into a full closure plan if we had to, which is one reason why I like it. But have you guys given that any thought?
Most definitely. That's why we provided the number of options that are there based on the feedback from our families, and thought about with the cases heightening in Ohio, that if we had to go back to full online or remote, that we would be prepared. Okay.
Well, I'm real curious about the feedback that you're going to get from families. If there's a way of sharing that with us, even in the raw form, that would be helpful, I think. That's all I have.
All right. Any other questions from anyone? If not, we'll move on to the next item on our agenda.
Thank you, and thank you, Cabinet, for your very, very hard work on this. We are in days where everything is hard. There's nothing's easy in a pandemic. So thank you guys for your steadfast dedication to this work. Thanks, Jody.
Yeah, thank you. So the next item on our agenda is the treasurer's report. I don't know, Scott, if you have anything to add in addition to the finance section that we had talked about earlier.
I don't, thank you.
Okay, then the next item is the board president's report. The only thing I have to report is there's another Northeastern Ohio School Board President's meeting tomorrow that I'll be attending. I'm sure that the topic will likely be everybody's draft opening plans. So thank you for tonight's presentation. I feel like I'm much more prepared to go to that meeting tomorrow. Then is there any board committee reports that anyone has to make?
I just want to acknowledge there's a lot of good work that's happening in the College Career Task Force. I'm sure there's going to be a presentation to the board, sometime in the future about where that's going. But other than that, I really don't have anything to report.
Okay, thank you. Is there any unfinished business? Any new business? Any correspondence and announcements? If not, then I think we're ready to close. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All right, Mr. Gaynor, will you call the roll? You're on mute, Scott.
Sorry. Ms. Wright.
Yes.
Mr. Posh.
Yes.
Mr. Rainey.
Yeah.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. We are adjourned.
Yes.
Thank you. Good night.
Good evening.
Good night.